Welcome to Doing the Work, a Naples integrated recovery podcast. My name is Brian, and this space is for anyone who's tired of surviving the same emotional and behavioral loops, whether that's anxiety, trauma, addiction, or problems in your relationships. Around here, we cut the surface level advice, no sugarcoating, no platitudes, no bumper sticker wisdom. We focus on clarity, responsibility, emotional discipline, and the courage to look at yourself honestly so that you can stop repeating the same old patterns and start living with intention instead of reaction. Let's get into it. Boundaries are often taught as simple limits, and this is all over Stoicism, calling it dichotomy of control. Mel Robbins' Let Them theory. Today I'm going to focus on a popularized version of Adler's concepts. It comes from a book called The Courage to be Disliked or The Courage to be Happy. There were two of them. And where that popularized version actually falls just a little bit short of the original concept and why the original concept is important. So, the base framework of what I'm talking about today is that boundaries come down to say what you need to say or say what belongs to you, let other people have their reaction, and it's not your responsibility to manage somebody else's emotions. And that is very useful, but the harder part is if there are additional layers not simplified in those books. And so today I'm going to talk about what happens if a boundary comes out after it has been unspoken, that you've been tolerating somebody else's BS for a long time. And now maybe there is years of resentment or shame attached to it. I'm going to talk about how you deliver a boundary and sometimes the needed repair, and that part, how that belongs to you. So you're not going to read any of that in the Let Them theory. You're not going to read that in The Courage to be Disliked. And so I'm going to start with a personal example, a lived experience. For most of my life, I have yo-yoed up and down like about 100 pounds. I guess some people who have only met me in the last year find that hard to believe. But for most of my life, my parents have commented on my weight or my appearance. Too fat, too skinny, too much on my plate too skimpy. Oh, you're going to have another piece of pizza? Man, you really need to eat more pizza. Never a stable target, never a clean number, never a body that got to just exist without review. Treated like a public object inside of a family system that other people should be evaluating, correcting, joking about, commenting on, worrying over, or physically inspecting. And if you do that for years, that can really do something to a person over time. So I do have an outline for another episode that I plan to do, hopefully with a guest that I've talked a little bit about with. And that'll be on body shame, disgust, family commentary, and the kind of damage that gets done when somebody thinks that they are just saying a little something about your weight. But for this episode, I'm going to focus on one specific piece of it because it captures something very important about responsibility, boundaries, participation, and the way that people function inside of relationships. So, a couple of months ago, I created a super uncomfortable moment that I went to a family member's house for dinner, and I was told that I was too thin. And so this person wasn't a first time. This is probably a decade of commentary, most recently in the last 6 months or so, even though my weight has been the same for like the last 16 months. Same number, same, like within 5 pounds, it's been the exact same. But for whatever reason, it repeatedly came down to how skinny I am and grabbing my ribs and making my body into the topic again. And for a long time, I brush it off or I laugh it off, and I don't make an issue of it, and I let the moment go, because I get that like family members are trying to do what they think is helpful, or that they may have concern, or they're doing what has been normalized for a long time. Sometimes I've offered way more information than I needed to, like saying, just went to the doctor, all the labs look great, the doctor is happy with my weight, any of that stuff. You don't owe that to anybody, first and foremost. But so this had been a long, ongoing topic, and I guess it was just a breaking point day for me that I was told I was too thin, had grabbed my ribs, and finally the boundary came out. But man, I laid it on so thick and so sharp and so talking down that the entire room was very, very, very uncomfortable. My partner had like buried himself into the couch, into his phone, trying to exist anywhere other than the room that we were in, because it came out heavy, right? It came out with a decade of past pain attached to it. Now, a lot of times people don't know that you're allowed to stop something that's fucked up when it's happening, especially if it's in your family. They just kind of go with it. Maybe they know intellectually that something shouldn't happen, but if you are living inside of an older family rule, then there's probably a part of you that kind of still feels like you're a kid, that you have to just tolerate that this is how it is. So the boundary came out. It was completely appropriate, but I misdelivered. So the basic sentence should have been very simple. Don't comment on my body. Don't touch my ribs. That should have been the content, but my delivery was way more complicated. I went on way too long. There was a very aggressive tone. It came out very harsh, and it was because it had years of backlog attached to it. So it wasn't just that moment. It was all the past moments of being too fat, too skinny, too much fucking pizza on your plate. You look like a Holocaust survivor. Face made, comment made, filling the cheeks up like a fat little squirrel, body judged, body treated, available for commentary. All of it came down the pipe at once, which is why the delivery back was so harsh. And that's what happens if a boundary sits underground for too long. It doesn't come out measured. It doesn't come out like a DBT Dear Man script. It comes out hot with family history and probably a hell of a lot more than that immediate moment can explain, which is why my partner was like, what the fuck is going on? After my nervous system had settled, about 5 minutes later, so probably a minute or so after this, I realized I have really shit the bed here. That was real hot. That came out real harsh. That came out with a lot of extra gas on it. And so after I had settled and recognized how uncomfortable I made the room, I pulled this person aside and I made repair. I acknowledged that my delivery was harsh, that there was a long history attached to it that came from years of shame, disgust, resentment, and then finally standing up for something that I should have said a long time ago. But here's what I did not do is I did not apologize for having a boundary. And all you're doing is reading the let them theory or the courage to be disliked, all of that gets compressed together and it misses Adler's core ideas. A lot of that gets collapsed together, and sometimes people think that if their delivery was too much, then maybe the boundary was wrong. Or they think that if the boundary was right, that maybe their delivery was justified. Because if all you're looking at is, I said what I needed to say and the rest is your part. No, not really. There's actually a couple of different things that are happening here. Content, delivery, and history. So the content is what needed to be said. The delivery is how it came out, and the history was how much charge is attached to it. So in this case, content, valid. Don't comment on my body. Don't grab my ribs. That's a boundary. Delivery is what needed review here. I waited way too long. It came out with way too much force, and there was a lot of old pain that was packed into the current sentence. And that history needed ownership because that reaction didn't form in a vacuum. It came from a long pattern of body scrutiny and a long pattern of failing to protect that line earlier. So that's the work, is own your delivery, but hold the boundary. You can respect the history without making the other person carry all of it in that one moment. You can hold the line without turning the whole thing into a prosecution. And if a person collapses, then you might start apologizing too broadly and then the boundary disappears. So this is something that I have seen, is that someone will set a boundary, maybe too harsh or something, and then they'll say, I'm sorry, forget that I said anything, or, well, I didn't mean that, or I'm sure I'm overreacting. And any of those might alleviate the awkwardness of the moment, but then the pattern stays alive. Next category is the person who justifies everything. So let's say that I had my super harsh delivery with all of that attached to it, and then I was just like, no, fuck you. You've been comment. No, you deserve it exactly how I gave it. That's not really clean either. Because if you're just justifying the way that you delivered this harsh boundary, then you're blocking your own growth. You might have said the right thing, but it was the wrong level of force. Maybe you waited too long, or you brought in 10 old scenes into one current moment, and then you turned the boundary into becoming the universal prosecutor. So a better repair is specific. That came out sharper than I wanted. There's a lot of history behind that. That was unreasonable. That was unfair. That was a bad delivery. And I still need you to stop commenting on my body. That kind of repair owns your shitty delivery. It preserves the line. It does not hand the boundary back. It doesn't undo it. And it also doesn't comfort the other person out of the reality that what they are doing needs to stop. Boundary setting is usually pretty uncomfortable. So this is where, for years, I used separation of tasks. This is Adlerian concept popularized by The Courage to Be Disliked and The Courage to Be Happy, two books that they're great, by the way. If you have not heard of those, check that out. To summarize that concept, separation of tasks would say, my job is to say the boundary. Their reaction to the boundary is their responsibility. It's my task to say what I need to say, and it's their task to respond back to it. So this book, or these books, they come from a Japanese dialogue style book that is built around Adlerian psychology, and the basic idea is very simple and useful. Know the part that belongs to you, and then know the part that belongs to somebody else. Your task includes your choices, your behavior, your words, your effort, your honesty, your participation, and your willingness to act the other person's task includes their reaction, their judgment, their approval, their disapproval, their emotional response, how they interpret it or how they selectively filter it, and what they choose to do with that. And that distinction can be useful because a lot of people live as if they are responsible for managing everybody else's internal weather. They manage other people's reactions. They anticipate how someone might react to that. They might over-explain. They soften every sentence. They are monitoring people's faces or tracking tone shift in the room, trying to make sure that nobody's going to be offended or angry or uncomfortable. And this is adult relation hostage negotiation. So separation of tasks cuts through that. Say what's yours and do what's yours, then let the other person have their reaction. Don't try to invade their emotional territory, and don't let them invade yours. So that all makes sense. The book is very helpful. The problem comes when people use this concept as a way to end their own self-examination and correction. So let's just say in my example that I gave, the boundary gets set, and then I'm like, yeah, well, if she didn't like it, then that's your shit. That's your task. Wrong. Sometimes a boundary is direct, measured, necessary, and another person doesn't like it. That fits. That's fine. Let them not like it. Other times, if I am just using, separation of tasks as a shield for me looking at my own shitty tone or timing or how long I have avoided doing what I needed to do, allowing it to build up, getting to the point that I had contempt about the topic, y'all have heard me talk about like a revenge part or like a desire to punish or make you see. That's all Brian work. And maybe you've got a little bit of that yourself. So that is where this concept can get flattened. Where does Adler fit into all this? Who is Adler? Alfred Adler was an Austrian psychiatrist and psychotherapist who came up with individual psychology. This is around 1900-ish. And if we go back to his material, it wasn't about drawing a line with a shitty delivery and then a mic drop. Instead, he was interested in how a person participates in their life tasks of work, friendship, love, family, community, responsibility, belonging, contribution, and courage. This founder of individual psychology, that name is misleading because actually individual psychology is deeply relational, but he was interested in the whole person and the person's movement through life, their private logic, their goals, their discouragement, and their way of seeking belonging and significance. So a lot of this boundary setting related stuff and his work focused on inferiority, courage, responsibility, community, and social interest. Why am I talking about all of this? I promise it all ties together because social interest is your capacity to stay oriented towards cooperation, contribution, and connection while remaining your own distinct individual person with agency. Because if everyone who ticks you off, you just set a boundary and then cut everybody off, you're going to be a very alone person. Why am I tying in more of Adler? Because it's all flattened in these books. But he organized human life around core tasks, major ones, usually described work, friendship, love. Everything psychological shows up in these domains because a person can sound wise in theory and then avoid responsibility at work or doing the work in their relationships. A person can talk about boundaries all day and then cut someone off immediately or punish people in their family systems or their friendships because they're not applying it correctly. Or they can know every therapy phrase in the world. And I see this all the time. All these little TikTok influencer people that like they think that they are applying therapy well, or they're using therapy buzzwords and they're grossly misapplying it. So Adler would ask, can this person cooperate, contribute? Can you act with courage? Can you stay connected in a difficult moment while not surrendering your self-respect? Can you hold that self-respect without being contemptuous? Can you deal with conflict without dominating the room and making everybody else that is present so uncomfortable that they are just like zoomed in on their phone, like I would do anything to not be in this room where Brian's making an ass out of himself? That is where this personal example fits. A family member comments on my body, grabs my ribs, "You're too skinny." The boundary is necessary. It's clear. Adler's question comes in, how did I function inside that relational task? Did I speak directly? Yes. Did I wait too long? Yes. Did that delay create a ton of extra force? Yes. Did I then walk away and say, oh, that family member's the problem, I said what I needed to say? Or did I repair the excess without weakening the line? Yes. And that is the difference between using a boundary as an endpoint or using it as part of your own growth. Because the modern boundary version softens this into the two piles. One pile, my behavior, the other pile is, their reaction. And that's a great starting point. If I say don't comment on my body and then somebody feels embarrassed that I called them out, or defensive, hurt, irritated, that reaction belongs to them. That part is true. You don't need to rescue somebody from the discomfort of being told not to cross a line. And that's where a lot of people need work. So the book is very helpful in itself. They set a boundary and then they immediately start going, maybe I should soften it, or they apologize for having a limit or trying to comfort the person that crossed the line. That is not good boundary setting. In fact, I would even argue that destroys the boundary from the inside. At the same time, if you set a boundary with unnecessary force, like I did in this story, and then you hide behind, their reaction is, that's their shit, then you are blocking your own growth. So Adler's frame gives a better standard. The reaction is not owned. The participation is owned. That means I do not own whether somebody likes being told to stop commenting on my body, but I do own if I waited too long, came in too hot, loaded the sentence with years of contempt, and then kept talking after the message had already landed. That was another part I missed in this story, was that I had been clear probably 1 minute in, and I went on for like 4 or 5 minutes, making sure you got it. Man, that's ugly. I wish I didn't do that. I've already repaired. But that's what happens when it came out with all of that backlog attached to it. So that is responsibility without withdrawal. I stay in my lane. I examine how I drove in my lane. And that requires enough self-respect to hold a boundary and enough humility to also look at, I delivered that kind of poorly. Some people can hold that line, but they cannot repair. Some people are good at repairing, but then they weaken the line when they do it. And some people just avoid the line entirely. They just explode, and then they're like, I'm just honest. Adler pushes towards function. Can you say the thing that needs to be said? Should you have said it earlier? If so, make sure that you're watching your tone and your force. Can you tolerate that the other person does not like hearing this? And if you are in excess, then can you repair the excess without handing the boundary back? That is mature relational task work. So, using the body comment example, the practical form is simple. Ask yourself, does this need an earlier intervention? Maybe a shorter sentence, steadier tone, less backlog in the first statement. Something like, don't comment on my body, don't comment on my weight, don't touch me like that, and then stop. If they ask why, the answer can be short, like, I don't like comments about my body. If they minimize it, you can just say, hey, I'm being clear. Don't comment on my body. If they say that they are joking, say, I don't understand. Don't comment on my body. If they are upset, let them be upset. This is where separation of tasks is useful in real life. Their embarrassment in a situation is theirs. Their defensiveness in a situation is theirs. Their discomfort that they are being corrected by somebody else is theirs. And your task is the boundary and your participation in the boundary setting. Now, for me, for example, that might mean that I need to watch my own tendency to over-explain, make someone understand, or to turn one current moment into a lifetime indictment, or to repair too much because I made the room feel awkward. And so that is where repair and collapse have to be separated. Repair sounds like that came out sharper than I wanted. There's a lot of history behind that. I still need you to not comment on my body. Collapse sounds like, I'm sorry, I shouldn't say anything. I know that you didn't mean that. I'm probably overreacting. Collapse means there's no boundary and it's probably going to continue. So those are two different things. Repair owns the delivery and keeps the boundary. Collapse hands the boundary back because the other person was uncomfortable in that moment. So the question after a boundary is specific. What am I repairing? The volume? How long I went on? The contempt or disgust that was in my voice? The timing, because I waited until I was flooded and so upset that it came out with a decade of history attached to it. The fact that I brought 10 past old scenes into this current moment. If so, repair that part, and then leave the boundary alone. So that is the work after the line is drawn. The boundary was right. The delivery is what needed review. The history explains the charge. The repair names the excess, and then the line stays intact. So ask yourself this. This is the check for a boundary. If there was 20% less intensity, would this have landed better? And if yes, then go back and redefine your delivery or repair. And if the line needs to still stand as it is, then keep it standing. I could keep going, but I'm going to work on keeping these under a half hour. So let's just call it that. That is boundary setting and repair, and the parts that are missing from the courage to be disliked and the courage to be happy, using Adler's original core concepts, and that is doing the work. Thanks for spending the time with me. If you found this episode helpful, please share it with somebody who may need to hear it. Be kind to yourself, be kind to people around you. Remember that we're all doing the best that we can with the tools that we currently have, and we're all capable of growing past that. If you'd like to reach out or connect, send me an email, brian@naplesintegratedrecovery.com. I hope to hear from you there. In the meantime, thanks again for listening. I'll see you on the next one.